Welcome. Today's Salon, we're going to talk about data best practices in journals and publications, some of the ways that publishing your data can really impact you as a researcher, the benefits of it, and then also some of the practices and more tangible information about what it looks like to publish your data from our colleagues at Dryad. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the DataWorks program, and then we'll jump right into the two exciting presentations we have today. So welcome. The DataWorks program is a program of FASEB to support biological and biomedical researchers to understand data sharing and reuse and really support the potential and the benefits that it has to advance research and advance human health. You can learn more about our program at faseb.org/DataWorks. And we're really excited to be giving this salon as part of our monthly Salon series, which features different research experts and provides you the opportunity to not just learn from them, but also have conversation with them. The components of the DataWorks program include the Salon, as I mentioned, also prize challenges to recognize and reward those who are using data sharing and reuse to advance research and really do some really innovative work in the field of biomedical research. And our help desk, which provides how-to guides, a live chatbot, and many resources to get you started and learn more about data management best practices. We really encourage you to join future salons and think about the ways that this program can support you. We'd love to hear from you as well. With that, I'm going to transition towards our speakers today. As I said, we're talking about data best practices in publications and journals, and I'm joined by two really wonderful speakers who are going to share two different perspectives on this topic. Our speakers include Darla Henderson, the Director of Publications and Director of Open Science and Research Integrity at FASEB, who will speak about the benefits and some of the motivators behind the impact that publishing your data and really making your data available to the research community can have on you as a researcher. We also have Jess Herzog, the Head of Publishing Services at Dryad, who really will speak about the process of publishing your data and the role that data curation and submitting your data set to a repository like Dryad can have on your research. With that, I'm going to transition over to Darla and let us jump into these great presentations.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Going to share my screen. Hi. I love that. So I'm really excited to come and talk to you today about some of the data best practices in journals and why things are maybe the way they are, as well as steps we can take to change that and change that culture along the way. And I'm not sure how many of you are library specialists and how many of you are scientists, but either way, I hope this presentation will be useful and you'll find it informative. So the first question I always ask myself is, what are the reasons? Why should scientists care? And how can we make sure that we convey that message, be it to scientists who are at our institution or to graduate students and postdocs that you might be training? And there are many reasons. These are the ones that speak the most to me. I think the first thing is when we do research, we really want it to be available for the long term. And we want that value to exist for a long time and availability. And I think we all know, in fact, that even though we have the best of intentions, that it can be very difficult to ensure the long-term availability if it sits inside a lab. Be it on a lab notebook or even within your own servers, it can be a much more challenging issue to ensure that long-term availability. The other is Reproducibility. Others can replicate your findings. Ideally, in a scientific world, we're building on the science that we've already discovered, and we're trying to improve that over time. And that can be made much more easy if data is shared. The third one is really critical for me because it's about transparency. And I think in today's world, when we look at the significant amount of information that we know is available on the internet and to the public via social media or other sources, so much of it doesn't have the validation and the curation that science goes through. And so if we're going to compete with misinformation and disinformation, we have to find ways to enhance that and to be really transparent. We need to build the trust in science and in our scientific findings. The fourth is it catalyzes discovery. It allows new analyses, integration of multiple data sets to look at things in ways that we're not able to look at individually. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the last one because I think this is where we often miss what is already there, and it can boost your career. So I'm going to go into the next slide and sort of give a little bit more of the details on how it can boost your career. So recently, there have been a number of studies on the visibility and citations tied to data sets themselves, but also to data that is tied to journal publications. And probably the largest is a study that came out last year that that looked at PLOS. It was PLOS and BMC journals, and basically looked at 500,000 journal articles in an open access data set. And what they found is, on average, there was slightly above a 25% gain in citations in the corresponding research article. And so, what I would say is, if you are a scientist, if you care about citations, and pretty much all scientists do, as part of the measure of your career, that is an easy fit. That is an easy thing to enhance. It also can enhance your credibility and reputation. And here it is, you're being transparent. You can showcase your rigor in your lab, and that can enhance your credibility and reputation. It can also attract collaborators and expand your network. Someone sees something that they may not have seen otherwise, and they reach out. I know about 20% of the scientists in a recent State of Open Data survey by Digital Science talked about, the fact that they had, in fact, been then asked to co-author another paper based on their data and their work. And so this can really expand your scientific network. Recognitions and awards, and this is something that I think we don't do enough of, but there are awards like the DataWorks Prize. You can get recognition, particularly if you deposit in a repository and there's a DOI. That DOI can show up on your ORCID account. You can cite that then on your, on your publications list as well. So there are opportunities here. I feel like we're not making enough of that right now, and there's an opportunity to really improve that. And compliance, both with journals and with funders. Certainly for getting new research funding, sharing data can be a big part of that story, but also simply just getting your article published in journal. More and more journals are requiring that data to be shared publicly. And then the last one is tied a little bit, in with the fact that I mentioned the value of longevity. If you and your lab are constantly tracking down where is this data and where is those findings, you're going to end up with a lot of time lost. So it's time saving for you in your own lab, but then also skills that your students can take and bring to bear in a public setting wherever they go in their career, be it academia or industry or other nonprofits. Having that ability to understand how to manage and share their data is really a valuable skill today. So what is up with data sharing in biological and biomedical journals, and who sets those requirements? And so what I wanted to do is just think a little bit here about what happens. So The requirements often vary by journal, by publisher, research field, and that doesn't make it easy on you all for the things that you're doing. May be established by a commercial publisher or publication staff, may also be established by a scholarly society, as it is at FASEB with our volunteer publications committee and our journal editorial board. So this is how we function with sort of a science first approach. But there may also be community-wide standards that have developed over time. And I know proteomics data and genomics data are areas where there are, widespread community standards. That sort of sets the stage for why it may not all be identical. And actually, field-specific requirements are really important for scientists because there are different bits of information that are being collected for different purposes and different uses. So what kinds of data-related publications requirements might you find in science journals? The type of data. You're going to see that, in some cases, the raw data is required. The processed data may also be required to be available. And the levels here always vary from encouraged to required. I guess there's technically a lower level of that, and that is where they don't mention the data at all. But journals have long been, looking at data and requiring data for various sets of proof. So this is just kind of a, an evolution of that, so that you're seeing more of the types of data being concerned or addressed. Additional requirements might include metadata or documentation, the format and the location of where the data has to be made available, again, can be encouraged or required. Different journals will speak specifically to whether the peer review of that data is encouraged or required. And more lately, you probably are seeing data availability statements, which may be encouraged or required, and data citation. So those are the types that you might see on your path. And where do you find this information? The number one place to find it for a journal is in the author guidelines. If you're looking for peer review, that would be the reviewer guidelines of a journal. And those are frequently found on the journal homepage under for authors, or a tool like that basically is for submission. And when you get into the author guidelines, what you'll find is that different author guidelines are structured differently. So again, a bit confusing, but you can usually search those for phrases like data to get to where you need to be. Those sections are typically under submission requirements or policies. Those are the two headers you would most often locate this information about data. If you have specific questions that you can't find in the guidelines, your best bet for a journal itself is to contact that editorial office or an editor. And in some case, publisher-wide policies are in place. So if you're publishing with a journal published by Elsevier, there's an Elsevier-wide policy that is likely in place. And those would be on the publisher's website. Generally, again, you can search for data policies. So what I like to do is think about how authors can enhance the data value, visibility, and citation. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit here, particularly as it's tied to journals. And I think everyone on the line is probably familiar with the FAIR principles, so you're going to see bits of those coming up here. I think it's really important to use descriptive metadata, which aids in discoverability, as well as just providing an accurate, complete picture of the data. It's important to use accurate but informative and inviting titles. When you're publishing your data set itself, it's important that that be something that conveys and attracts your readership, the proper readership. I would always encourage using interoperable, widely available file formats, particularly for processed data, and where feasible, that is always encouraged because, again, we're trying to improve accessibility. When you're talking about data as it's connected to a publication, we encourage integration and connecting with the article and the grants. And this is where persistent identifiers like ORCID and DOIs come into play, because you want to have that ability to link between the different pieces in the infrastructure. We encourage authors to deposit in curated, publicly accessible repositories. We think that's really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about data. And we also encourage authors, when they can, to choose licenses that allow for reuse, because again, this is a strategy that will enhance the value of your data and its visibility as well. We often receive questions around data and copyright. And I think it's because there's a lack of understanding amongst scientists and authors in general that when they create the data, they own the data that they create. And so there's often a question of what that means. You automatically own the copyright for data that you create. And then we'll talk a little bit more about if you're using someone else's data in a bit. But that's not something that's recognized often by authors. And so I think it's really important that we continue to convey that data belongs to them. During the publication process, some publishers, it depends on where you put the data, right? If you put the data in an article and the article is then under copyright, that copyright refers to the data in the form that it's currently presented in the article. And so, we are trying to, again, encourage our authors to think beyond the article, to think about data living in repositories and places like that. Often also ask about data and open access. Well, what happens if it is, if it's under an open access license or a public access mandate, if my research is under a public access mandate? And really, it's a lot of the same philosophy, and that is that your data belongs to you. It depends on the license type, and that's the next item we're going to talk about that you choose, how that can be reused. For data and license choices, what you'll see is usually you will, if you were talking again about open access, you'll see data licenses that range from CC0, which means this is the Creative Commons. I give it to the world and I don't need credit for it, to CC BY, the most common one. And that really says you can use my work for any purpose you like. You simply have to give me credit. To CC BY NC, which is non-commercial. It means that others can use your work as long as it's not for commercial purposes. And then ND, which is no derivatives. Others can use my work, but they can't create derivatives. So those are the most common licenses. And of course, there are variations and there's share alike. So there's a lot of options here. And I think that, one of the things that we could probably do better at is really educating and informing authors what those licenses mean and what their options are along the path. There are exceptions to data sharing in publications. So journals may allow exceptions even if they require data sharing, or they may have alternate arrangements for those requirements with publications. Examples include sensitive or confidential information, data privacy concerns, and here I would point to protected species and the location of a protected species, or human subject data, and there are many others. Intellectual property issues, either I'm in the process of applying for a patent and this is my intellectual property, or the flip side of that, which is I have used someone else's data and I think I have the right, but I may not make all of that data available because of IP limits that person has placed, the original author has placed on their data. And then there may be other restrictive concerns such as national security or safety issues that come into play with authors, particularly who are, working on grants for the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy. There may be national security issues that come to play. So there are exceptions that are often allowed for that. And then I'm going to just sort of getting to the end here, talk a little bit about resources from FASEB journals. So we've been on a quest in the last 2 years to start to revise some of the way that we handle this. And we've implemented data availability statements. We are, so those are required for all of our published research now. And for the first year and a half, we were allowing authors to say data available on request. And we're now moving away from that as an option. So it's no longer a tick box. Moving forward, you'll start to see more of the location of that data. And so we are continuing to allow the data to be in supporting information. We are moving to encouraging repositories, and I'll talk a bit about one of the ways we're encouraging repository use. We also have built in our author guidelines with specific details for clinical research, for human data and privacy, for animals in research, and we have a lot on sort of the omics area in general, with specific details for various data types, and that includes some public repositories and some requirements. We have a variety of research integrity and rigor and reproducibility checks and tools that are in place for the authors, editors, and reviewers to support that. And we're researching what is coming up next with generative AI tools as well. So how can we, how can we make sure that we're continuing to provide that great feedback? We also take data training seriously, and we're in the process of training and onboarding a very large early career researcher editorial board. So we appointed 118 members. It was 116 originally. It's gone up to 118. So, and we are training those individuals, including how they should handle data as a peer reviewer. And so we're really trying to bring up and give back to the community and bring that next generation along with us on this story of data and publications. And the last item is something that we've recently done with Dryad, which is why I'm delighted Jess is joining us today. And we basically integrated at no cost to the authors the process for depositing any data set into Dryad. And we integrated that into our peer review and submission process. There's a simple checkbox that authors choose, and they upload the data. The data set can remain behind the firewall during the peer review process and come out at the end or according to other guidance set. And I'll let Jess talk a little bit more about that. But what that allows us to do then is have access. First of all, we're encouraging the authors to deposit it into a repository instead of just putting it into the supporting information or methods section. We're really trying to drive that behavior, make it easy for them. And then it allows us to peer review and have access to that data from the beginning of the submission process, which is really important for encouraging the peer review of data and that process. And then, with the flip side, when the article publishes, it's automatically connected to this data set. And so we're eliminating some of those pain points about, putting in the different required persistent identifiers. We're not requiring the authors to do anything additional on that front. And so our vision is really supporting, encouraging, and making it easy for authors to share fair data as part of the publication process. I think obviously we all recognize that they need to be doing this earlier in the process, their data management and sharing, but at the very least, we want to make that process easy to the authors. And then before I hand it over, I just want to acknowledge that this is a team that we have at FASEB who are really focused on research integrity. Ken is focused on driving impact and reach, and Lakshmi is our peer review manager, and our editor-in-chief of FASEB Journals is Lauren Wold. But we also have a volunteer-led committee of scientists who are from different subject areas, representing different FASEB member societies, and they are the ones who support our efforts to drive messages and to make policy decisions like this. And so Nancy Turner, Liliana Schaefer, Rita Sheeman, Louis Montner, Courtney Carner, and Dennis Baskin are our current representatives on that committee. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions, or Emily, would you like Jess to go?
Yeah, we did have a few questions within the chat, and I think let's save them for the end. One that you can work on while Jess is speaking is citations. But I'd like to hear from Jess, and then we can have those questions addressed in the end at a Q&A. Here's Jess Herzog.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share my desktop. Can everyone see that presentation, the first slide?
Looks great.
Thank you. Emily promised that this would be exciting, so I'm going to hope to deliver. Darla did such a great job covering a lot of content, so I may move through this quickly because I would like to show you the live site, and that might help answer some questions you have in the chat. Let's go, sorry. First slide here is just me. I just wanted to reintroduce myself and talk a little bit about what I do. I manage our small team of curators and help support our community of researchers, authors, publishers, and libraries by sometimes I help cover our help desk. When Darla talks about resources, that's a good place for you to go to if you don't know where to go to find information about best practices for submitting, or how to prepare your data for submission. Additionally, me and our team of curators can meet for training purposes and offer to participate and host webinars such as this one. Our team also works very closely with our developers to help streamline and optimize the curation and publication processes and establish policies for all kinds of things. And I mention this because we have a couple surveys available, and if you ever want to get in touch and actually provide feedback on features we might have rolling out, you can contact me. And if you just need help, you can contact me or help. My email address is there. And it's also online. Briefly, this is what Dryad is. We're a platform for open data. We work to make it freely accessible, of course, to our community, and the curators are a big part of this effort, helping to make it FAIR compliant, as Darla mentioned. I'm sure you're familiar with FAIR. So here's what I'm going to cover today, just navigating the data submission process. How do you know where to put your data? Best practices and tips for preparing it. I know Darla covered some of that too. Common do's and don'ts, and strategies to get your work, your research seen and connected. So let's dig in. Admittedly, I think there's a bit of a disconnect. I think we still need our community of researchers and authors to get on board with publishing their data and, obtaining citation and links and DOIs for their data. So I'm happy that Darla already told us. She already told us and covered all the reasons why it's important to share your data, so I don't have to review that with you today. At Dryad and with other generalist repositories, there are expectations of NIH funders. There are requirements by the journal and publishers to make the data available before publication of the article. This is something that is growing within the research community. This growing need and requirements to make that data available. And it can be tricky to know where to start, because this is a new thing and there are mandates. So it's something you have to do, regardless of whether or not you want to do it or if you don't understand the importance. So here are some important questions to consider when choosing where to host your data. What is your data? Is it best to host in a discipline-specific repository, your institutional repository, or should it go to a general place? And I think that's what essentially Dryad is. It's a platform for data that doesn't have a home. Do you require long-term preservation? And what will others need to reuse or understand the data that you've posted to make it easier and faster to replicate? Is there user support? Darla also shared guidance provided, and this is really important, right? Is there an author checklist? Is there a help desk? Are there a guide for authors? That should be the first place you look if you need guidance. And as I mentioned, what are the funder, university, or journal requirements for your data and data availability statements? Do you have sensitive data? Do you have species data or human data? This will be an important consideration. because that will need to be carefully handled. And how can the repository help show the impact of my work? This is obviously important, right? For all the reasons that Darla pointed out in terms of your career and movement. So as I mentioned, Dryad is part of a generalist repository community. And of course, there might be instances where your data is better suited for a domain-specific repo. But to help guide your decision, there is this repository comparison chart that is published on Zenodo. And I'm actually working with the Gray community to make an update to this because it was published some time ago. But this is a good place, a good resource for you to go to kind of suss out the best home for your data. And let's talk a little bit about what to do to prepare your data for sharing in any generalist repository. These are just standard best practices, and Darla also mentioned some of these. Unprocessed raw data is preferred, and organizing it is essential, not only for like us at Dryad that curate the data and evaluate it, but also for potential future end users. Code, scripts, and software. If you have any of that, you can also upload it. You can upload it to Dryad as long as it complies with the CC0 license that's required. And if not, I can show you another option of where to put it, which is with Zenodo, which is part of the Dryad submission site. And then any output, stats or visualizations. So get it all together and decide what's necessary. Sometimes we get a lot of data, a lot, and some of it's not all entirely necessary. Especially where human data is concerned. Sometimes we have to thin that out a bit. Verify that they can be shared publicly. So sometimes we receive submissions that with derived data, and those are under copyright. And this is the value that curators can offer because they can help you identify whether your data can be shared. And if not, if you're not sure, or if you want to select a different alternate license than CC0, which eliminates any barriers to reuse and doesn't require attribution, you can also upload to Zenodo or an alternate repo. And so, right, identifiable human or species data, just take a long, hard look and revisit author guidelines to ensure or help you determine what can be shared. Open file formats are preferred, of course. If there are proprietary files included or special software that's needed to access it, we can certainly download a trial to curate it or work closely with the author to determine the best course of action for that. And of course, plain text formats are great. I mentioned organization, and what's not mentioned in this bulleted list at the right is that something that's really nicely organized is really easy to publish quickly because we can just look at the data and get a sense of what's included and check the boxes we need on our end to ensure that it is ready to publish. And down below there is a link to Dryad best practices, which include, I have a image here of file organization, for example. And again, the curators can help with that if you have questions about how to organize the files or how to upload them. And then this is probably the most important piece for us. And I know that some of our publishers have also echoed the importance of providing a complete, organized, comprehensive README file. And so this is the key that unlocks the understanding of the data. And this is critical, not only for end users, as I mentioned, but also curators, like the Dryad curators, because they have a variety of professional experience. So they're not all paleontologists. They have a variety of backgrounds. So, they're looking at data that maybe out of their realm of expertise. So to get published swiftly, this is an important piece. And Dryad has a template. I know Cornell has a template that you can use as guidance. I wanted to show you, or better yet, I hope I can do this. Let's see. Can you see this README on my screen now? I tried to switch screens and be very savvy with this.
Yes.
Darla. Yeah. This is an example of a beautiful README file. And it may look overwhelming, but a lot of this information is just the title and the Dryad DOI and the author contact information. But so this is quite a lengthy one, but you can see that it follows our template with regard to sharing. It's confirming the CC0 license required. Data sources are listed here. And then all the files and folders, the file names are here, folders are explained. And then usually what we request authors to do is also to fill out and describe all the variables in their data. And explain any empty or missing cells of data. This is our top sendback is for improvements to this README file. So this is an example of a very comprehensive, beautiful README file. And this one's pretty lengthy, but that'll do the trick. And this is what we love to see. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, I think I can do it. Yes, I did it. So this is exactly what I showed you a moment ago. So getting the README right is really important, and we have resources to help you with that. And then finally, title and keywords, and I know Darla hit on this as well. This is one of our top sendbacks too. Sometimes we get data submissions and the title is simply raw data. So of course, that's not going to be discoverable if someone goes to search or find your data. So in at least for Dryad, what we find is that our authors often choose the title of their research article, and we can simply put a prefix data from and use that. So that's fine to do too. And keywords are getting title, abstract, and keywords are essential in order to aid in discoverability, to make sure people can find your data and cite it, even better. So this is just in review of the best practices we just covered. And for additional guidance, there's that link again to the Dryad site. But this is guidance. This is good guidance for any repository that you might submit to. I just wanted to mention additional considerations for human subject data. There's a link here to our guide for human subjects data, which provides additional references and tools and ways to ensure that your data is de-identified and prevent it from being re-identified. So let's talk about what not to do. And I probably covered this as I was going on and on about what to do. But essentially, we've looked at, essentially what you want to do is get from point A, which is submission, right to publication. That's the goal. And so it's essential to look at the guide for authors and understand what's required for submission so that you can simply get published as soon as you submit. And the paths I have here are the 5 top reasons we cannot publish your data straight away. These are the 5 most common reasons that data sets can't be published and we have to have a back and forth with the author. So it's important to address these things right away. When I looked at this, I thought of when I'm driving with my kids and I'm trying to get from Buffalo to Albany, and there's so many stops for food or batteries or bathroom. And it's good to take care of all that stuff before I get them in the car, right? It's kind of the same thing. Kind of same. But these can cost you time. And in some cases, if you're waiting to publish that research article, that is pretty costly time because you want to publish quickly. Otherwise, the publication of your research article might be held up. So I talked about resources. Boy, is this an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to demonstrate that there's a lot of information available to you here, especially for things that you may not entirely understand, like why is CC0 important to use, at least, when submitting your data, how to create a README file for fast publication. I've already covered the top 5 reasons we can't publish your data set. So all of these things go into greater detail. Most of them are blog posts or links to FAIR or how to organize your data in a good way. And then I would like to show you this. So we talked about connectivity and discoverability, and this is just an example on the right side of a landing page of a Dryad published data set. So if you have not seen a Dryad data set, or if you have yet to submit, this is a good view for you. At the top, you see the title of the submission, and then right below that, you see the author list. So when you log into this repository, Dryad, you have to log in using your ORCID ID. And the other co-authors are provided with the option to link their ORCID ID as well. And so this is a major thing, right? Discoverability and connectivity. And next, the citation follows along with the abstract and expandable README file and funding at the bottom. Our affiliations and funding information, we work to connect to the WAR registry to ensure that we have everything is connected. So oftentimes authors will submit and list their affiliation using like a country code and mailbox, or sometimes even apartment codes. So what we do is just try to match those with the affiliations in the ROAR database, also just again to make it easier to search and find. And then on the top right, you see where you can download the data files, link to related works. This is also essential for discoverability. You can link to your publication. You can link to your data management plan. You can link to the software that you uploaded for hosting on Zenodo or any other supplementary information. You can also link to GitHub. So there, that related work section is essential for connecting to other research objects. And you can share your data easily right under there through LinkedIn or Facebook or what have you. And then metrics. So you can track views, downloads, and citations through DataSite. So this one was recently published when I grabbed the screenshot, which is why everything's set to 0. But that's information you can also use in your research packages. And then keywords I mentioned are essential, and the license is at the bottom there. And so this is just a screen capture, but I did want to, if you have time, if we have time, I can cut to the live site. Do you mind, Emily, just quickly if I cut to it, or do you want to do questions?
Yeah, no, I think that would be really helpful to people to see, and then we can jump towards some questions.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Right.
So this is just an example of the Dryad submission page. There are 4 sections here. This is a section where all the metadata is input, and I talked about connectivity. As you enter your journal name here, this list is populated by the WAR database. So the curators and authors work to match that. And for FASEB, for example, once you submit a journal name there, on the last page, it will confirm sponsorship for that data submission. As I mentioned, here's a great example. This is probably the title of the journal article, and we just popped data from in front of that. The curators work to ensure that all this information is clean and connected and correct. That includes any formatting. funding information is a new field we have here, which can include award number or any programs. And the abstract is required, as well as at least 4 keywords. And here's the method section, which is optional. And usually authors will copy and paste this right from the research article, although best practice is to actually create something that speaks to the data itself more specifically. And then here is where you can connect to other research objects, as I mentioned. And the second page is our template for the README file. This is, you can toggle, you can upload README that you have prepared, and the curators will help with any formatting issues that you might have here. But this is where you would populate all that essential information we need. And then here's where you can upload files. So I think this is important to show you because there are options if your data doesn't comply with the license Dryad requires or another repo requires. You can upload files for hosting at Zenodo, and these files are when they're uploaded to Zenodo, you'll have a you'll be provided a DOI that's versionable, and the data will be published as soon as the Dryad DOI is published. So everything publishes together. And finally, this is the final page where you can review everything that was input. You'll see a link to the primary article is here. And then you'll have to agree to terms and service and such and payment if that applies to you. But the last thing, Emily, that I just wanted to show is, I'm hoping this wasn't, let me find one that is, you're seeing my dashboard. I want to show you one that is not yet submitted, that doesn't belong to me. Some of these are revisions, but we talked about, or at least in the chat, someone was mentioning about double-blind review process. So for Dryad, every submission is provided with this reviewer sharing link. Can you see it?
Yes.
Thanks. So this is the link that can be shared during the peer review process. And let me show you, I will, did I copied it? Great. If I open this in a new window, do you see my incognito window, Emily?
Yes.
Thank you. So anyone with that link, be it the journal, the reviewers, a colleague, when they select the link, an automatic download will initiate, and you'll notice it just has the title and it's only downloading the data file, so nothing else. It will also download the README file if you included it. So if the journal has a double-blind review process, you're going to want to remove your author names from that file, because then everyone will know who you are. But so that link I just showed you is temporary. The permanent link is the DOI, which is assigned upon submission to Dryad. That temporary link will disappear. And I'm mentioning it like this because sometimes authors share that link with the journal and they publish it in their data availability statement. And that's a no-no because no one's going to see it once your data set's published and this DOI is active. But this is a great feature that you can use. And again, if all that will be downloaded are all the files here, and none of the metadata will be visible until your submission is published. So that's how we can help support the peer review process. Now I'm finished, Emily.
I think it's really helpful for people to see just a very tangible example of what this looks like. And I know we've had a number of questions. If you have any new questions in the chat, feel free to add them. I know that one of the more popular questions in the chat was related to licensing. And Darla, I wonder if you could speak about that. And then, as I said, if you have any new questions, you're encouraged to add them into the chat.
Yeah, so I was going to just briefly speak to the comment about moving away from ND. It's not something we encourage. And I actually don't think it's something most publishers are encouraging, at least in the science space, for the data when it's put in the supporting information or into a repository. But I think one of the reasons that we have to kind of just be careful about that is, particularly in the biomedical space, we're dealing with personal data. We're sometimes dealing with community data. So we just want to be cautious about what we ask for, and what we press our community to do, and keep in mind that there are things like Indigenous data sovereignty and GDPR on data privacy and things that might come into play. I don't think that is the major concern, but just let's all keep that in mind. We do try to encourage, and that's why we use the phrase, we encourage you to share as permissible as you can, right? We want it to be as open as you can in terms of the reuse possibility, but we recognize there are legitimate reasons why certain communities may not want that data to have everything and all the reuse possibilities. That's it.
Yeah. Just there were some questions related to linking related works later in the process. And I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, data uploaded to Dryad can be modified at any time. So pre-publication or post-publication, we see a lot of authors adding links to their related article because sometimes they don't have that article DOI in time.
Great.
And so any of the metadata can be changed too. So if your submission is, if your manuscript is not going to be published in one journal and you want to submit to another, you just can update the metadata and continue on.
Great, great. There was also a question. I think many of the questions have been addressed. I'm really excited to see so many in the chat. So thank you for using that, everyone who joined. But there was a question related to kind of publisher workflow post Nelson. I know that Darla, you provided some insight on that, but generally, kind of where do you see that workflow moving? And can you speak to some of the themes that you addressed in terms of simplifying and streamlining it?
Right. And this is something we wanted to do pre-Nelson. This process that we've got set up with Dryad was something we wanted to do pre-Nelson, but I think the Nelson memo, in terms of thinking about the timing of availability for data, and what we're hearing from a lot of the federal agencies is the data should be available upon publication of the corresponding research article. Is pretty common phrase that we're hearing bandied about. And that brings with it potential limitations because of workflow changes. So, how do we deal with that? And I mean, that's one of the beauties of this particular setup that we have with Dryad. And, we're grateful for Dryad. We think Dryad is a great solution because of the curation and the good work they do. But we would be open to other repository partners as well. We just want to make this easy for our authors. I think you're going to see publishers moving towards things like this. How do we implement this in the process to make it easier for authors to make that data available? It's certainly something that I didn't take lightly when I read the memo and then had those conversations with agencies. It is a critical part of our role is to make this work where we can make it work. And what we've seen recently are changes such as authors coming back and will have to publish an addition and correction because they didn't include a link that they meant to include, or they didn't have the link. And so we recognize that some of this is really bumpy right now, but it should be moving towards a smoother sailing for the authors in the long run. Zach, I love not only the linking, but the fact that it's actually in the peer review system. So we're encouraging our authors. We're saying, do you want to deposit it to Dryad? No cost to you. Click here. It'll remain behind the firewall during peer review. You sort of control that release of data. And then and really trying to drive the behavior towards a repository. I think that's a hard thing for us to do, but we'd like to see that happen. We'd love to see the data be more available in repositories. Messaging. That is the pain point that's the bane of our existence, Brian. It is the kind of message that I gave at the beginning of my presentation. When we're engaging with authors and talking with authors, we use those talking points. The the value in longevity of your research, I think is a good one. I think authors are attracted by the fact that this drives citations to the primary article. That is actually probably the most important thing for them in terms of what you can use to pull and reel them in, because that's a clear career booster. More so than anything else, I think they are starting to hear, and different scientists hear, the message on transparency and how that's important for science. More than they're hearing reproducibility or catalyzing new discovery, they're hearing, I get citations to my research. It's there for me anytime, and it's also there, like it's my legacy, right? And then the transparency one is hitting some of the authors.
Okay, I want to look at time and know that there's some great conversation here, especially around the ways that these workflows are shifting and the things that are moving forward to make publishing data and sharing data as part of publications even easier and more effective. And all those changes are really exciting. So thank you everyone for joining. Our next salon will be on May 23rd, where we'll be talking about best practices for sharing data that must be stored or shared in multiple repositories due to its nature. And I want to thank our speakers, Darla and Jess. We really had a great conversation today, and appreciate everyone participating. Bye there.
Thanks, Emily.